They say history is written by the victors. But what if it was rewritten by scholars? It's not just about who wins the wars, it's about who gets to tell the story afterward. For centuries, anthropology, the study of humans, our cultures, our origins, has held the keys to our past. But what happens when those keys are used not to unlock, but to lock away the truth? Today, we're diving deep into the heart of this hidden history. We're going to explore how anthropology, in the hands of empires and agendas, has been used to bury the legacy of entire civilizations. Stay with me, because once you see the world through this lens, you'll never look at history the same way again. Now let's be clear. Anthropology, at its core, is a noble pursuit. It's about understanding the vast tapestry of human experience, the cultures, languages, and traditions that make us who we are. But like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill. Anthropology in the 18th and 19th centuries, during the age of European colonialism, became that double-edged sword. As European powers raced to conquer and colonize the globe, they needed a way to justify their actions. Enter anthropology, stage left. Suddenly, you had these scholars, these experts, using their research to create a hierarchy of civilizations, ranking them on a scale of primitive to advanced. Guess who always ended up at the top of that scale? You got it, the Europeans. And guess who was relegated to the bottom, deemed savage and uncivilized? Indigenous populations around the world who just happened to possess resources the Europeans wanted. Coincidence? I don't think so. Many of these early anthropologists were funded by their governments, by the very empires engaged in colonization. Their mission wasn't purely academic, it was inherently political. They were tasked with finding evidence to support the idea that European culture was superior, that their way of life was the pinnacle of human achievement. And when they couldn't find the evidence, they fabricated it. Let's talk about the Moors, shall we? Because their story is a prime example of how anthropology has been used to distort history. The Moors, my friends, were brilliant. For centuries, from the 8th to the 15th centuries, they ruled over Al-Andalus, what we now call Spain and Portugal, and during their reign, they ushered in a golden age of knowledge and innovation that would illuminate the dark ages of Europe. These were astronomers who mapped the stars, mathematicians who developed algebra, physicians who pioneered surgery, and scholars who preserved ancient Greek and Roman texts that would have otherwise been lost to time. They built magnificent cities, adorned with stunning architecture, intricate water systems, and vibrant centers of learning. But here's the rub. The Moors weren't just Arabs, as many textbooks would have you believe. They were a diverse group, a melting pot of cultures and ethnicities, including a significant population of black Africans from south of the Sahara. And yet, mainstream history has often downplayed or outright ignored this African influence, preferring to credit the Moors' achievements to their Arab heritage, or to label them simply as Mediterranean. Why is that, you ask? Because it challenges a deeply ingrained narrative that has long placed Europe at the center of the story of human progress. Now let's journey across the Atlantic to the Americas, to the ancient land of Mesoamerica. Here, amidst the jungles and ruins, we encounter another civilization that throws a wrench into the traditional narrative, the Olmecs. The Olmecs flourished from around 1600 to 400 BC, and they are considered the mother culture of Mesoamerica, influencing later civilizations like the Maya and the Aztecs. They were skilled artists, astronomers, and mathematicians, and they left behind a legacy of enigmatic artifacts, including their most famous, the colossal stone heads. These massive heads, carved from basalt and weighing up to 50 tons, have become an enduring symbol of the Olmec civilization, but they've also become a source of controversy because their features, the broad noses, the full lips, the tightly coiled hair, are undeniably African. Now, some mainstream archaeologists have tried to explain away this striking resemblance, claiming it's just a coincidence or that the features are stylized and don't necessarily reflect a real connection to Africa. But let's be honest, folks, these heads don't lie, and the similarities don't end there. When we look at the cultural practices, the spiritual beliefs, the astronomical knowledge of the Olmecs, we find intriguing parallels with civilizations across the Atlantic in Africa. Speaking of Columbus, let's talk about what might be one of the biggest cover-ups in history. The idea that Christopher Columbus discovered America is so ingrained in our collective consciousness that it's practically heresy to question it. But what if I told you that there's compelling evidence to suggest that Africans sailed to the Americas long before Columbus set sail? We're talking about evidence from ancient maps, from oral histories, from linguistic and botanical studies that all point to the possibility of transatlantic voyages in the pre-Columbian era. Let's start with the maps. There's a fascinating map called the Piri Reis map, drawn by a Turkish admiral in the 16th century. This map, which incorporates data from even older maps, depicts the Americas with stunning accuracy, including details that weren't supposed to have been known to Europeans at the time. Some scholars believe the source material for this map may have originated in ancient Egypt or even earlier. Then there are the oral histories. In West Africa, there are stories passed down through generations about a king named Mansa Abubakari II of Mali, who, in the 14th century, launched a fleet of ships across the Atlantic Ocean, never to return. They say DNA is the blueprint of life. It holds the secrets of our ancestry, connecting us to our ancestors across time and space. And in recent years, DNA analysis has revolutionized our understanding of human migration patterns, including the peopling of the Americas. Now, for a long time, the prevailing theory was that the Americas were first populated by people who crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Asia around 15,000 years ago. And while that theory still holds true, DNA evidence has revealed a much more complex and nuanced story. Genetic studies have shown that there were multiple waves of migration to the Americas, and some of those waves may have originated from places other than Asia, including Africa. For instance, researchers have found traces of African DNA in the genetic makeup of some Native American populations, particularly in South America. If the evidence for an ancient black presence in America is so compelling, why haven't we heard about it sooner? Why isn't this knowledge more widespread? Well, it's not a coincidence, my friends. The truth has been actively suppressed for centuries by the very institutions that are supposed to be the guardians of knowledge. We're talking about museums, universities, government-funded research organizations, the gatekeepers of history. For too long, these institutions have curated a narrow and often Eurocentric view of the past, a view that reinforces existing power structures and silences dissenting voices. Think about the museums you've visited. How many of them prominently feature artifacts and exhibits that challenge the traditional narrative of history? How many of them tell the stories of marginalized communities, of the people whose histories have been erased or rewritten? The sad truth is that many museums have been complicit in perpetuating a distorted view of the past, often relegating artifacts that contradict the dominant narrative to their basements or back rooms, hidden from public view. Universities, too, have played a role in suppressing knowledge. For generations, they have taught a curriculum that centers Europe and the West as the primary drivers of progress and innovation, while marginalizing the contributions of other cultures. The suppression of this knowledge wasn't some random accident. It was deliberate, strategic, and deeply intertwined with the legacy of colonialism, racism, and white supremacy. You see, to acknowledge the true history of black people in America, to recognize their ancient roots and their contributions to civilization, would undermine the very foundation upon which these systems of oppression were built. Think about it. If the world knew that Africans had built sophisticated civilizations, had sailed across oceans, had shared their knowledge and culture with the world long before Europeans even knew what lay beyond their shores, it would shatter the myth of black inferiority. It would expose the lie that justified centuries of enslavement, colonization, and exploitation. If black people were not inherently inferior, then what justification was there for treating them as such? But here's the beautiful thing about truth. It has a way of bubbling to the surface, no matter how deeply it's buried. And today, we're witnessing a powerful movement to reclaim the hidden history of black people in America. All across the globe, independent researchers, historians, archaeologists, and everyday people are digging deep, unearthing the evidence, and sharing it with the world. They're writing books, producing documentaries, creating online communities, and organizing conferences. They're using DNA testing to trace their ancestry and reconnect with their roots. And they're doing it all outside of the traditional institutions that have long silenced their voices. They're bypassing the gatekeepers and taking their stories directly to the people. This is a movement fueled by a thirst for knowledge, a yearning for truth, and a desire to heal the wounds of the past. It's about reclaiming agency over our history, our identity, and our future, and it's gaining momentum every single day. The ancient black presence in America was never lost. It was hidden in plain sight, buried beneath layers of misinformation, disinformation, and deliberate erasure. But the truth has a way of revealing itself, doesn't it? And once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's time to open our eyes, to free our minds from the shackles of the past, and to embrace a more complete and accurate understanding of history. If this video opened your mind even a little, hit that like button and subscribe to Mystic Messenger 369 for more mind-blowing explorations into hidden history. Because remember, your awakening is part of something much bigger.